All right, so first we're going to be finishing how do you stack up lab. We've already covered the front portion and steps 1 through 13, where you should have your entire geologic column complete. If you don't, you need to make sure you complete your entire geologic column, putting it all together, and then taping it to this area here. And then you're going to work on these questions and complete them. There are 7 questions, and then you're going to turn it into the basket. Now, before you do that, I want to explain something to you, because at one portion of this lesson, it's going to ask you to put the fossils in the order from oldest to youngest. Now, when we look at this geologic column, or this example of a geologic column, we know that the oldest rock layer is where? You should be thinking at the bottom, and the youngest rock layer is at the top. Therefore, the fossils are going to be dated according to where they are in the layers. So our oldest fossil would be the triangle. Although our triangles go from the oldest layer all the way up to 1, 2, 3, 4, a 5th layer up, they still came first because they're in the oldest layer. So what this means is this organism lived first, and it continued to live or reproduce, and it lived all the way through this layer, or this type of organism continued to live through this layer. And this is when it finally died, because that's when the last fossil was found. The next organism came along in another geologic time, which would be the swirlies. And we can call it swirly, or we can call it ammonites, because that's what it actually represents, a fossil called an ammonite. But we can call it a swirly. And the swirlies lived no longer. They only lived in this time area, this time division, or this part of time. And then they died out after this time. And then you have triangles still live, triangles still live, triangles still live. We do not need to write that again, because we know they're the oldest. They just lived longer. The next organism that shows up is the square. The square is younger than the triangle, and it's also younger than the swirlies, because it's here. Now, the square does show up again in another time area, but it's still younger than the triangles and younger than the swirly. It just lived during these 2 time areas, or these 2 time divisions. And then comes along the circle, which lived in this area, and it also lived in this area. It's younger than the square because it came later than the square. Now, if I asked you the question, what would be the index fossil? What would you tell me? You should be able to say that the index fossil is the swirly, because it only appears in one geologic time. It's only here. So that would be the index fossil for this particular example. Now, when you do your lab, make sure you pay attention to your different geologic time, stratigraphic divisions, so that you know what is what. All right, make sure when you finish your lab paper that looks like this, when you finish all questions, and you've taped your geologic column here, make sure you turn it into the basket, and you continue on with the next lesson, which I will put a link on this video as well for the next lesson, or you can go back to my website and look at the next part of your lesson and click on that to continue with the next lesson.